Mr. Roberto, a successful businessman from Ohio, decides to pay a special visit to the local orphanage during the end-of-the-year festivities. While distributing the gifts, Roberto observes a quiet and lonely girl in the corner of the room. She seems distant and sad, contrasting with the joy of the other children around. Roberto feels a pinch in his heart when he notices that the girl has a birthmark on her left wrist identical to the mark his missing daughter had. Roberto grew up in a small country town surrounded by the serenity of the green fields and the simplicity of rural life. From an early age, he showed a natural talent for leadership and a burning desire for success. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, while helping his father in the family's small orchard, Roberto talked animatedly about his aspirations. "Dad, I want to do something big in life," Roberto said, looking at the apple trees laden with ripe fruit. "I want to build something that makes a difference, something that people remember." His father, with a proud smile, ran his hand through Roberto's hair. "You've always been special, son. Your mother and I know that you are capable of great things. Just don't forget to honor where you came from." The sudden loss of Roberto's father when he was just 16 years old was a devastating blow to the family. His mother, a strong-hearted woman, redoubled her efforts to keep the family's small grocery store running. It was a difficult period, but Roberto found inspiration in his mother's determination. In his final year of high school, Roberto excelled not only academically but also as captain of the school football team. During a decisive match when the score was tied and time was running out, he inspired his teammates with an incisive speech in the locker room. "Come on, guys. This is our moment. We can't let that opportunity slip away. We fight together, we sweat together. Now let's win together." His coach, a man who saw potential in Roberto from day one, smiled at the young captain's words. "That's right, Roberto. Show everyone why you are the leader of this team." With his determination and remarkable abilities, Roberto was accepted into the University of Business Administration in the neighboring city. It was there that he plunged headlong into his studies, absorbing everything about business strategies, finance, and management. It was during his first semester that he met Marta, a visual arts student with an infectious smile and a passion for life. "Hi, I'm Marta," she said, reaching out to greet him at a freshman homecoming party. "You seem to be someone with big plans. I'm curious to know more about you." Roberto smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "I am Roberto. You are right, Marta. I have big plans for the future." The two quickly became inseparable, sharing not only a love for each other, but also a vision of a future full of possibilities. During the 4 years of college, Roberto balanced his academic activities with small ventures that he started as side projects. He knew that one day he would build something that would make his father proud. Upon graduating with honors, Roberto looked to the future with renewed determination. He and Marta married shortly after graduation, ready to face the challenges and rewards that life had in store for them. From the beginning of their marriage, Roberto and Marta shared a common dream: to be parents. During a quiet Sunday afternoon, as they walked through the city park, they talked about their plans for the future. "Imagine, Marta," Roberto said, holding her hand affectionately. "We will have a son or a daughter, and we will teach them to love life, to dream big, and to pursue their goals." Martha smiled, her eyes shining with the same determination that Robert so admired in her. "We will be amazing parents, Robert, and we will teach our son or our daughter to paint, to explore the beauty of the world through the arts." However, the years passed without the long-awaited moment of having a child coming. Roberto focused intensely on his career, climbing steps in the business world with determination and growing success. Soon after graduating from the University of Business Administration, Roberto returned to his hometown with an ambitious plan to turn his parents' modest grocery store into a successful supermarket chain. "This grocery store is our legacy, Mom," Roberto said, looking around with determination. "But we need to modernize. Let's start with the inventory system and then go after new customers," he said on the first day of work to his wife. Her already elderly mother, but with a kind smile and firm eyes, nodded confidently. "Your father would be proud to see how you are taking care of things, son. But don't forget what he has always taught us about honesty and customer service." With each change he implemented, Roberto saw the small grocery store grow in popularity. New customers appeared every day, attracted by the quality of products and personalized service. Soon the grocery store turned into a small neighborhood supermarket with ambitious expansion plans. "We're going to buy that property next door," Roberto told one of his managers. "I want to open another branch in another nearby city. Let's show we can compete with the big boys." While expanding his business, Roberto faced challenges such as fierce competition and local economic crises. However, his determination and management skills helped him overcome every obstacle, cementing his reputation as a respected leader and innovator. As Roberto's supermarket chain grew, his name became synonymous with business success in Ohio. He sponsored local events, supported community initiatives, and was frequently invited to speak about entrepreneurship at local conferences and universities. "Roberto, you really turned our grocery store into something amazing," Marta said, looking with admiration at the new branches that were now part of the family's supermarket empire.
Roberto smiled, hugging Marta affectionately.
"It's only the beginning, my love. We have a lot more ahead of us." On a summer evening, while dining by candlelight in his favorite restaurant, Roberto held Marta's hand with a serious look, but charged with love. "Marta, I know I've been working hard in recent years, but never forget that my biggest dream is still to build a family next to you." Martha nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. "I know, Roberto, and I also want it more than anything. We just need to be patient and trust that our time will come." As time went on, the pressure of wanting to be parents became more palpable. Conversations about adoption and fertility treatments became part of their quiet evenings at home. Roberto consulted with specialists while Marta explored all possible options for realizing her dream of becoming a mother. Finally, after years of uncertainty and heartbreak at each failed attempt, a new hope emerged. After years of hard work and dedication, Roberto and Marta finally received the exciting news they had been waiting for. Marta held Roberto's hand with a glint of happiness in her eyes as she shared the news. "Marta, are you really pregnant?" Roberto asked, his voice choked with emotion. Martha nodded, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "Yes, Roberto. We are expecting a daughter." Roberto could not contain the emotions that overflowed in his chest. He hugged Martha tightly, feeling a mixture of joy, gratitude, and responsibility. "This is wonderful, my love. I can't believe it. A daughter of ours." That evening, they decided to go out to celebrate not only pregnancy but also recent professional achievements. Roberto had just closed a significant deal to acquire one of the most valuable supermarket chains in the region, thus consolidating a certain local monopoly. While toasting with champagne in an upscale restaurant in the city, Roberto looked at Marta with admiration. "Marta, you are the reason why I work so hard every day. For you and for our future." Martha smiled, gently touching Robert's hand on the table. "And you, Roberto, are my inspiration. We are building something amazing together." They talked late into the night, dreaming of the future and planning how they would welcome the new member of the family. Roberto felt fulfilled not only by his professional successes, but by the blessing of having Marta by his side, and now the promise of a daughter who would transform their lives forever. In the months that followed the exciting news of Marta's pregnancy, Roberto plunged more than ever headlong into work with a renewed determination. Business was thriving like never before, boosted by the recent deal that established a local monopoly for its supermarket chain. "We will review the plans for the new branch in Hillview," Roberto told his operations manager during a strategy meeting. "I want to make sure everything is perfect before the inauguration." His days were filled with visits to stores, meetings with suppliers, and discussions about expansion strategies. He felt motivated not only by financial success, but also by the future he was building for his family. In the evening, next to Marta, he gently touched her belly while they talked about the name of their upcoming daughter. "How do you feel, Marta?" asked Roberto, stroking his belly tenderly. Martha smiled, her eyes full of love and expectation. "I'm happy, Roberto. I can't wait to meet our little Sophia." Roberto kissed her forehead affectionately. "Me too, Marta. We will do everything we can to give her the best start in life." As the day of Sophia's birth approached, Roberto found himself more attentive to the details in his business, ensuring that everything was in order so that he could spend more time next to Marta and their newborn daughter. In the aisles of supermarkets, he smiled at employees and customers, feeling a sense of accomplishment as he thought of the legacy he was building for his family and community. When the big day finally arrived after months of preparation and anticipation, Roberto and Marta saw their daughter's face for the first time. The birth of Sophia filled their lives with indescribable joy. In the maternity room, Roberto held Marta's hand tenderly while she looked in wonder at little Sophia in his arms. Tears of happiness flowed down Roberto's face as he admired his daughter, so small and perfect. "She's beautiful, Marta," Roberto murmured, unable to contain his emotion. Martha nodded, a radiant smile lighting up her tired but happy face. "Our little Sophia. She is our greatest treasure." In the first days after Sophia's birth, Roberto devoted himself entirely to his family. He took time off work to be by Marta and her daughter's side, participating in Sophia's care and enjoying every precious moment together. Sitting in the rocking chair in the hospital room, Roberto held Sophia in his arms, feeling the warmth of the small body against his chest. He looked at Martha, who was resting on the bed next to them, and felt a deep gratitude for all that they had already achieved together, planning much greater achievements. "Marta, we are living a dream," Roberto said softly, looking at his wife lovingly. "Our family is complete now." Marta smiled, her eyes dizzy with happiness. Yes, Roberto. And it's just the beginning of a wonderful journey. In the following weeks, while adjusting to the new routine with Sofia at home, Roberto and Marta shared tired but radiant smiles. They knew their lives had changed forever, and every moment by their daughter's side was a gift they cherished deeply. The first days at home with Sofia were a mixture of pure joy and nights of little sleep for Roberto and Marta. Every moment with her newborn daughter was precious and full of discoveries. One sunny morning, while changing Sofia after a gentle shower, Roberto noticed a small birthmark on his arm. His eyes fixed on her for a moment before a memory from the past hit him. The same birthmark he possessed. Marta, Roberto called, his voice heavy with emotion. Come and see this. Marta, who was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, rushed to the bedroom. What is it, Roberto? He held Sofia's arm, delicately showing her the birthmark. Do you see it here? It's the same birthmark I have. Marta looked at Roberto, her eyes widened in surprise. It's true. How is it possible? Roberto gently stroked Sofia's arm, feeling an inexplicable connection between them. I don't know, Marta, but it's like that's a sign. She really is our daughter. He smiled in admiration. Marta wrapped Roberto in a warm embrace, sharing her emotions. We knew it from the moment we saw it, didn't we? She's ours somehow. In the days that followed, Roberto and Marta continued to admire Sofia with renewed love. Every look at their little daughter reminded them of the miracle of life and the special bond they shared as a family. They talked about Sofia's future, their dreams, and hopes for her as they grew up together. The discovery of the birthmark only strengthened her conviction that her family was a precious gift, and they were ready to face any challenge together. As Sofia grew older, Roberto's business prospered, but he began to feel the increasing weight of his entrepreneurial responsibilities. The hectic routine and incessant demands often kept him busy, leaving him with less time to enjoy the precious moments with his family. One afternoon, as he watched Sofia running through the garden, Robert sighed, feeling a mixture of pride and concern. She had the curious eyes and determination that reminded him so much of himself. However, he knew he needed to better balance his time between business and his personal life. That same night, during the family dinner, Roberto noticed how Marta watched him with a worried expression. She knew how dedicated he was to business, but she also understood the importance of being there for Sofia. Roberto, Marta began softly, you have been working a lot lately. Sofia misses you. Roberto put down the cutlery, looking at Marta with a mixture of guilt and determination. I know, Marta. Just me. I want to provide the best for you. To Sofia. Martha nodded, her gentle eyes conveying understanding. I know that you do everything for us, Roberto, but Sofia needs you here too. She's growing up so fast. That night, after Sofia went to bed, Roberto reflected on Marta's words. He knew he needed to make adjustments in his life to find a healthy balance between his career and his family. Life seemed to be at its peak for Roberto and Marta. Sofia was growing up, and Roberto, despite the workload, had found a balance between business and family. However, fate reserved a cruel blow that would change everything forever. It was a quiet, sunny afternoon. Sofia was walking in the park with one of the nannies, Clara, a trusted woman who had worked for the family for years. Sofia's laughter echoed through the park as she happily ran among the trees. Suddenly, everything changed. Clara, turning to pick up a toy, realized that Sofia was no longer around. She searched desperately, calling the girl's name, but there was no sign of Sofia. In a matter of minutes, the park became a scene of panic. At home, Roberto and Marta were discussing details of a family trip when the phone rang. It was Claire, crying and in shock. Robert answered with grim foreboding. Robert? Sofia? Her. She's gone, sobbed Clara. Roberto felt the ground disappear under his feet. What do you mean, gone? His voice was filled with dread. Clara explained what had happened, her voice trembling and disconnected. I was taking care of her, and when I turned around, she was no longer there. I looked everywhere, but...
Roberto, I'm sorry.
Martha, hearing the conversation, collapsed to the floor, crying desperately. Roberto, trying to remain calm, called the police, immediately reporting the disappearance. When the police arrived at the park, they began an intensive search, took dogs on a leash, and even a helicopter covered the entire area. Roberto and Marta were there, desperate and not knowing what to do. Officials promised to do everything in their power to find Sofia, but fear and uncertainty were overwhelming. Authorities were alerted, and the operation contacted the entire state, leaving airports on alert. That night, Clara returned to Sofia's parents' house, her face pale and her expression of devastating guilt. As she walked through the door, she fainted from exhaustion and despair. Roberto picked her up before she fell to the ground, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking only of the missing daughter. In the following days, Roberto and Marta lived in a constant nightmare. The press reported Sofia's disappearance, and volunteers helped with the search. Roberto could barely work, and his attention was fully focused on finding his daughter. The search for Sofia continued, and although the hour was slow to pass amid anguish, soon the days turned into weeks. Marta and Roberto were living a constant nightmare with their lives revolving around the hope and despair of finding their missing daughter. Martha was completely devastated. She could barely eat or sleep, spending her days and nights looking at pictures of Sofia, remembering the happy moments they shared. Every corner of the house seemed empty without Sofia's infectious laughter. "Roberto, I don't know how to continue," Marta whispered one night, tears streaming down her face. "Everything seems so empty." Roberto hugged her, feeling the same deep pain. "We're going to find her, Marta. We can't give up." He tried to comfort her, even though he himself was completely devastated and cried most of the day. He had left his job completely aside, delegated all responsibilities to his managers, and began to devote all his time to the search for Sofia. He was determined not to rest until his daughter was back in his arms. "I'm not going to stop until we find our daughter," Roberto firmly told his employees before walking away from the business. "Trust the team and take good care of everything. My priority now is Sofia." The police were also working tirelessly, following all possible leads. Volunteers joined the search, spreading posters and organizing search parties in the surrounding areas. The local community has shown incredible support, doing everything in their power to help the family. One afternoon, one of the detectives came to Roberto and Marta's house with an update. "We are following a new lead that could lead us somewhere. We found a suspicious car that was seen in the condo park area on the day of the disappearance." Roberto grabbed Marta's hand tightly. "Anything that helps, detective. Please find our daughter." Despite the despair, the community stood by Roberto and Marta. Friends and neighbors offered constant support, bringing meals, helping organize searches, and offering words of encouragement. And everyone wondered how that could have happened inside the condo. Roberto spent his days distributing posters, talking to the police, and participating in searches. In the evening, he returned home exhausted and emotionally worn out, but always trying to be strong for Marta. "We'll find her, Martha," he repeated, trying to keep hope alive. "She is our daughter. She's coming back to us." As the investigation progressed, police began to consider all possibilities. Clara, Sofia's nanny, became a major focus of the investigations. Although she was a trusted woman for the family, the police needed to explore all lines of investigation. One afternoon, Clara was called to the police station to give a formal statement. She was visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying so much. Upon entering the interrogation room, he sat with trembling hands, clutching a handkerchief. "Clara," Detective Johnson began, looking at her earnestly. "We know this is hard for you, but we need you to tell us everything you remember about that day. Any detail can be crucial." Clara wiped away her tears, trying to compose herself. "I understand, detective. Just me. I don't know what happened. We were in the park. Sofia was playing happily. I turned around for a second, only to catch the toy she dropped, and when I turned back, she was no longer there." "Did you notice anything, or anyone suspicious in the park that day?" Johnson asked, noting every word. Clara shook her head in despair. "No, nothing. It was an ordinary afternoon like so many others we spent in the park. There were other children, parents, people walking their dogs, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary." Clara was in tears, guilt crushing her heart. "I'm so sorry, detective. I love Sofia as if she were my own daughter. I would do anything to bring her back. I will never forgive myself for letting that happen." Johnson paused, noting the sincerity in Clara's despair. "We understand your pain, Clara. We need to make sure we are investigating all possibilities. You have been an exemplary nanny, and we honestly have no reason to believe you had any involvement. But we need to be thorough." Clara nodded, sobbing. "I will do anything to help. Please find Sofia." Meanwhile, at home, Roberto and Marta were eager for any news. They trusted Clara, but investigations were necessary. Robert held Martha's hand as they tried to stay strong. "Marta, we need to trust the police. They are doing everything they can," Roberto said, trying to keep his voice steady. Martha nodded, though her heart was broken. "I know, Roberto. I just wish it would be over soon, that our Sofia would return home." Police continued to investigate all leads. Clara's words were crucial to understanding the events of the day. They revisited the park, looked for security cameras in the area, and interviewed witnesses who were present that day. Detective Johnson, after hearing Clara's testimony, came out determined. "We have to find this child. Every minute is crucial." As the days went by and Sofia was still missing, Marta's health began to deteriorate rapidly. The emotional pain was manifesting physically, and she spent most of her days crying or in a state of deep apathy. Roberto did his best to console Marta, but the situation only seemed to get worse. He watched his wife languish before his eyes and felt powerless to help her. "Marta, please, you need to eat something," Roberto said one night, trying to feed Marta with a tablespoon. She pulled her hand away from him, turning her face. "I can't, Roberto. Not without Sofia," answered Martha, her voice weak and her eyes lifeless. Roberto sighed, feeling the pain and despair growing inside him. Over time, Marta began to get seriously ill. She slept only with the help of medicine, and even then her sleep was restless and filled with nightmares. One day, while Marta was lying in bed, Roberto entered the room and saw that she was shaking. He ran to her worried. "Marta, are you okay?" he asked, holding her hand. She looked at him with feverish eyes. "I feel like I'm falling apart, Roberto. The pain is unbearable." Robert held Martha firmly, trying to convey some strength. "You are strong, Martha. We need each other now more than ever. I'm here with you." But not even the best doctors in Ohio knew what to do. The situation was extremely worrying, and every new day without news only made everything worse. Friends and family began to notice Marta's condition and offered help. Anna, a longtime friend, came to visit them often. "Roberto," Anna said, looking worried at Marta. "She is destroying herself." Robert agreed, knowing that he needed to act. "I know, Anna. We don't know what to do anymore," he replied disconsolately. Martha looked exhausted and without strength. "I just want my daughter back," he muttered, almost voiceless. Roberto held her hand tightly. "We're going to do everything we can to help you, Martha. I need you strong. Sofia needs the two of us strong to find her." He spent nights beside her, holding her hand while she slept. "Let's get through this together, Marta. I will not give up on you or Sofia." Hope was a faint flame, but Robert clung to it with all the strength he had, determined to save his family from the darkness that threatened to consume them. The days and nights blended into an indistinguishable blur for Roberto and Marta. Sofia's absence hung over the house like a permanent cloud of despair and sadness. Every corner of the home exuded memories of her missing daughter, making each day a never-ending battle with grief. Roberto devoted himself to trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, even though he knew Marta was slowly disintegrating before his eyes. He spent hours beside her, trying to wrap her in a veil of care and comfort that seemed more fragile with each passing day. One afternoon, while Marta was lying in bed, Roberto entered the room with a tray of food. Sunlight entered weakly through the half-open curtains, casting a faint glow into the room. "Marta, love, please try to eat a little," Roberto begged, holding the tray in front of her. "You have to stay strong. Sofia will need us when she gets back." Martha turned slowly, her deep, dull eyes fixed on Robert's. She looked like a shadow of what was outside her features, marked by suffering and hopelessness. "Me? I can't, Roberto," she murmured, her voice breaking. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. I hear your laughter. The pain is unbearable." Roberto sat next to her on the bed, holding her cold and fragile hand. "I know, Marta. I know it's hard, but we need to stay strong. We need to believe that she will come back to us." Martha let out a long, trembling sigh, tears silently rolling down her face. "I wanted to have your strength, but I feel empty, lost. Like a part of me was ripped away and never came back." Roberto pulled Marta closer, wrapping her in a tight hug. "We're in this together. I won't let you fall. We need each other now more than ever." But despite his best efforts, Roberto knew he was losing Marta. She slept more and more, but only with the help of strong medicines. His moments of lucidity were rare, and when they came, they were filled with pain that seemed unbearable. One evening, after a long and silent dinner, Martha retired early to her room. Roberto, feeling restless, went to her, finding her lying on the bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Marta, love, I'm here with you. Let's get through this together," he said, his voice heavy with deep, heartfelt pain. Marta turned her head slowly to look at Roberto. Her eyes were dull, as if the light of life was going out inside her. "Roberto, I don't know if I can fight anymore. I'm so tired of waiting, of suffering. If I die, maybe I can find her." He felt a lump form in his throat, but tried not to let his voice betray the pain he felt. "I understand, Marta, but think of Sofia. Think about how she needs us. We need to be strong for her." Martha closed her eyes and tears ran down the sides of her face. "I know you're trying, Robert, but the pain, it's like a weight I can't lift. I miss her every moment, and that absence is consuming me." Roberto shook her hand harder, desperate not to lose her too. "Marta, please don't give up. Let's find our daughter. I promise I won't stop looking for her, no matter how long it takes." Martha opened her eyes and looked at him with an intensity that broke her heart. "You have always been strong, Robert. Always believed. But me, I feel so weak. I have no more strength." Roberto didn't know what to say. He felt helpless, as if the words that had always helped him face life's challenges weren't enough. "I love you, Marta, more than anything. I don't know what I would do without you." She gave a sad, almost imperceptible smile. "I love you, Roberto. I will always love it. But I'm so tired." That night, Roberto stayed by Marta's side until she fell asleep holding her hand. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but refused to give in to despair. He slept beside her, hoping his presence would be enough to keep hope alive. But the next morning, when the sun rose on the horizon and illuminated the room with a soft glow, Roberto realized that something was wrong. Martha was motionless, her face serene, as if she had finally found peace. His heart, however, was shattered. "Marta," he called, his voice trembling. He touched her face, feeling the cold skin under his fingers. "Marta, please wake up." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert felt a wave of despair wash over him, and he hugged Martha's inert body, tears flowing freely.
No, Marta.
"Don't leave me. I need you. Sophia needs you." The house, which had once been filled with laughter and love, was now shrouded in a shadow of deep sadness. Robert, alone and devastated, held Martha for a long time, unable to accept the reality that lay before him. When he finally managed to get up, he called the emergency services, his voice breaking as he reported his wife's death. Friends and family came offering support, but the pain Roberto felt was a bottomless pit. Marta's death was a devastating blow, but it also ignited a flame of unwavering determination in Roberto. He knew he couldn't let tragedy destroy all that was left. He promised himself and Martha's memory that he would continue to seek Sophia more fervently than ever. At Marta's funeral, as he watched the coffin being lowered into the earth, Roberto whispered, "I'm going to find our daughter Marta. For you, for me, for Sophia. I won't stop until she's back in our arms." The tragedy had torn Robert's heart, but it had also strengthened him. He was determined not to let the darkness prevail. Sophia was still out there, and he would do everything in his power to bring her back home. The months that followed the tragedy were like a dense fog that enveloped Roberto in an existence of shadows and pain. Each day was a battle against longing, a desperate struggle to find some meaning in Sophia's absence and Marta's early departure. The huge mansion, once so vibrant and full of life, has become a silent shrine of painful memories. Roberto woke up every morning with the weight of an unbearable burden on his shoulders. The loneliness of the empty bed next to him was a constant reminder of the loss he faced. He stood up, driven by inertia and the need to keep up appearances, even if inside he felt completely broken. The work from which he was gradually trying to return became a momentary escape, a way of trying to drown out the incessant voices in his mind, the unanswered questions that haunted him at every moment. But even there, among the familiar corridors of the office he had so painstakingly built, Roberto felt lost. His thoughts wandered aimlessly. Sometimes he found himself standing in front of the window, looking beyond the skyscrapers towering against the sky. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Roberto came home and found himself standing at the door of the living room. The silence inside the house was deafening. He walked to the kitchen, a room of memories where he had so often shared laughter and meals with Marta and Sophia. He sat at the table, his head down, his hands resting on the cold wood. "Why, you guys?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from so much emotional wear and tear. "Why did she have to leave? And you, Sophia, where are you?" Roberto looked around at the pictures on the wall, the colorful drawings of Sophia that were still attached to the refrigerator. Every object in the house was a silent testimony to a life he now felt was crumbling around him. Friends and family tried to comfort him, but the pain he felt was something that could not be fully shared. Richard, his friend since childhood, was one of the few who persisted in being by his side, even as Robert seemed to sink deeper and deeper into the darkness of his own grief. One afternoon, Ricardo appeared unannounced, knocking determinedly on the door. Roberto, who barely had the strength to get out of bed in those days, got up with an almost Herculean effort to go to meet him after one of the maids called him in the room. "Roberto," Ricardo said, wrapping him in a firm hug, "I'm here. I know you are suffering, but you can't face it alone." Roberto allowed himself to be guided into the living room, where the two sat in silence for a moment. The weight of sadness hung between them, palpable like a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. "I miss them so much, Ricardo," Roberto murmured, finally, his voice choked. "Marta, she believed in me in a way I could never fully understand. And Sophia, I was supposed to be protecting her, and I failed. I failed as a father and as a husband." Richard listened intently, his expression marked by compassion and shared sadness. "You didn't fail, Robert. No one could have predicted what happened. You are human, not a superhero." Robert nodded slowly, absorbing his friend's words. "I just wish I could have done more." Now it feels like I'm just waiting stuck in this anguish that has no end. Richard squeezed Robert's shoulder firmly. You are stronger than you think, Robert. And we're gonna find Sophia, no matter how long it takes. In the months that followed, Roberto plunged even deeper into the search for Sophia. His home office became a hub of operations with maps strewn across the walls, folders full of investigative reports and meticulous notes that he reviewed tirelessly in an almost paranoid manner. Each new clue, however tenuous, was a spark of hope that kept him moving forward. He hired private detectives, talked to local informants, and made regular visits to police stations to follow up on any developments in the case. One evening, while reviewing once again the files stacked on his desk, the phone rang. It was Detective Johnson, his voice overflowing with restrained urgency. Roberto, we found something. A witness reported seeing a girl very similar to Sophia in a nearby town. We're following that lead right now. Robert's heart raced with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Thank you, Johnson. I'll be on my way. Arriving in the aforementioned city, Roberto met with Detective Johnson in a small park where the witness had seen the girl. It was a quiet place bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon, but Roberto could feel the nervousness coursing through his veins. This is where the witness last saw her, the detective explained, pointing to a wooden bench near the playground. She was playing here with a woman who looked like her mother. Roberto walked slowly through the park, his eyes examining every detail. He approached the bench, half expecting to see a familiar shadow emerging from some hidden corner. Did the woman say anything? Did you make any gesture that might give you a clue? Roberto asked, his voice trembling with restrained expectation. The witness shook his head. No, she just seemed to be enjoying her time with the girl. Then they just left. Roberto looked around, desperately searching for any sign, any clue that might lead him to Sophia. Sophia? He muttered, his hands shaking slightly. Hours dragged on as the investigation team scoured the park and surrounding area for any trace of the missing girl. The sun was beginning to set when they finally decided to postpone the search for that day, to no avail. Returning home, Roberto felt disappointment weigh on his shoulders, but also a renewed flame of determination. He knew he couldn't give up. Sophia was out there somewhere waiting to be found. On the way back, Marta's words echoed in her mind. You have always been strong, Roberto. Always believed. And he knew he had to keep believing for her and for Sophia. The months dragged on for Roberto, each day looking like a grim repeat of the previous one. While he persisted in his search for Sophia, life continued to move around him, ruthless and indifferent to his personal suffering. In his home, now a mere solitary refuge, Roberto faced not only the void left by the absence of his wife and daughter, but also the growing challenges in his business empire. The news that business was facing a downturn for the first time since he took control of his family's small market was like a further blow to his already fragile emotional state. Sitting in his office overlooking the city, Roberto stared at the financial reports with a mixture of dismay and bewilderment. Where once there was steady growth and success, now there were red numbers and a sense of inevitable burnout. What happened? He muttered to himself, running his hand over his tired face. He mentally went over every strategic decision, every investment, trying to find where things started to fall apart. His mind wandered, sinking into thoughts of regret. He thought of Martha, who had always been his advisor, his anchor in the midst of business storms, and Sophia, whose innocent smile had been a source of inspiration to him in happier times. Not all the money in the world can bring you back, Roberto muttered, his voice echoing in the silence of the office. He felt helpless in the face of the magnitude of his losses, both personal and professional. As the days dragged on, Roberto found himself in a constant dilemma between his responsibility as a business leader and his personal anguish. Every strategic decision now seemed loaded with a greater weight than before, as he found himself facing not only a decline in business, but also a void that seemed to deepen with each passing day. On an especially dark night, he walked to his home library, a sanctuary of dusty books and memories shared with Martha. He picked up a book that she used to read to Sophia before bed, leafing through the pages with trembling fingers. You always had a way of working things out, he murmured to Marta's image, his voice filled with longing. I miss you so much. Robert closed the book with a heavy sigh, his heart heavy with the weight of loneliness and responsibility that now weighed on him. He knew he needed to find a way to rebuild his business, not just out of obligation, but as a way to honor the legacy Martha held so dear. The next morning, he called an urgent meeting with his top executives. Sitting around the imposing conference table, tense faces reflected the gravity of the situation. Roberto looked at each of them, feeling the weight of leadership on his shoulders. We are facing significant challenges, he began, his voice steady despite the internal storm. We need to meticulously analyze our operations, identify where we are going wrong, and take decisive action to correct course. The weeks that followed were marked by intense analysis and heated debates within the company. Roberto plunged headlong into the operational details, reviewing every aspect of the business he had so proudly built. He spent endless hours in the boardroom surrounded by charts, reports, and financial projections. Every decision was now made with a meticulousness bordering on obsession, every strategy discussed minutely to ensure it was the right one. At home, the nights were lonely. Robert lay in the bed that seemed to grow colder every night, surrounded by the shadows of what might have been. Sometimes he would close his eyes and could almost feel Martha's presence beside him, comforting him with words of encouragement that echoed in his mind. In one of these moments of deep reflection, he found himself returning to the memory of a special day with Marta and Sophia in the park. He remembered his daughter's infectious laughter as she ran across the lawns, her eyes shining with joy. Martha beside him watched with a loving smile, her hand entwined in his. "I need to bring this back," Roberto muttered into the emptiness of the dark room. "I need to bring the light back into our lives." It was at this moment that he got up, scared, losing sleep. He was again ready to enter a spiral of tireless work, which had been what had harmed him the most. He could not disguise his pain with work that would not give anything beneficial to himself. Roberto spent that early morning in Claro, sitting in his favorite armchair in front of the office window. The city outside was asleep, but his mind seethed with tumultuous thoughts. He could not shake the feeling that he was missing out on something crucial, something that could not be redeemed by profits or the expansion of his business. As the night wore on silently, Roberto felt Marta's presence hovering around him like a living memory that did not leave him. He closed his eyes for a moment, searching the memory for that comforting smile that used to brighten the darkest days. "Roberto," whispered a soft voice in his mind, as clear as if he were physically there. "You need to find your way back to us." He swallowed hard, his eyes moist with restrained emotion. Martha has always been his anchor, the voice of reason and love that he valued so much. And now, in his physical absence, his wisdom seemed to echo through the void. "What should I do?" murmured Robert to the silence of the night. He knew he couldn't go on as before. Work had always been an escape for him, but now he understood that he could not fill the void with the constant occupation of business. Slowly, as if guided by an invisible hand, Roberto began to formulate a plan. He needed to free himself from the chains that bound him to his work desk, the endless meetings, and the decisions that seemed increasingly empty. He had to let go of all that. He got up from the armchair and walked to the desk, turning on the lamp that cast a soft light on the scattered documents. He looked at the portrait of Marta and Sophia that he always kept next to the computer. "Sell the company," Roberto whispered to himself, as if testing the idea out loud. The idea was frightening. The company was more than a livelihood. It was a legacy, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. But it also represented a burden, a responsibility that consumed him day after day. He closed his eyes again, concentrating on the sense of Martha's presence. "I have to live for Sophia. I have to find a way to find her and to be present, truly present." Determined, Roberto began to sketch a plan. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Selling a company of that magnitude would require time, patience, and strategy. But he also knew that he could no longer put off what his heart told him was the right path. The next day, Roberto plunged headlong into the process of preparing for the sale of the company. He summoned his most trusted financial and legal advisors, discussed terms and conditions, and began exploring potential buyers. Every step was a mixture of relief and apprehension. He felt like he was saying goodbye to an old friend while making room for a new chapter in his life. With each document signing, with each strategic meeting, he felt an increasing lightness, as if he was finally finding the balance between the painful past and an uncertain, but full of possibilities, future. At night, he left the office behind earlier than before. He walked through the streets of the city, feeling the cool night wind caress his face. In his mind, he visualized Sophia, now just a distant memory, but a constant presence in his heart. He knew the road ahead would be challenging. The pain of loss still accompanied him at every step, but now there was a spark of renewed hope. He could almost hear Marta whispering in his ear, "You're doing what's right, Roberto. We're in this together." And so Roberto moved on, guided by the loving voice that still echoed in his soul, determined to find a new purpose beyond the walls of his former business empire. Slowly, after months of intense negotiations and thoughtful decisions, Roberto finally found a suitable buyer for his company. It was a monumental decision, not only financially but also emotionally. He knew he was giving up something that had been the center of his life for so long, but he also felt a deep relief and a sense of liberation. The last contract signing meeting was held in a luxurious office with lawyers and representatives of both parties present. Roberto looked around the table, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and resignation. The documents were passed from hand to hand, each signature marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new journey. As the final signing was completed, Roberto felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. It was as if an invisible burden had been lifted from his back, allowing him to finally breathe more freely. He got up from the table and extended his hand to the buyer, a gesture of mutual respect for what they had achieved together in that room. The buyer smiled, recognizing the importance of the moment for both him and Roberto. "It's a new beginning," the buyer said with a tone of voice that echoed sincerity. Roberto agreed with a nod, feeling a mixture of emotions within himself. He was leaving behind an important chapter of his life, but was ready to face the future with a new determination. As he left the building, Roberto looked up at the blue sky above, feeling the sun's rays warm his face. It was as if nature was also celebrating his decision. He took a deep breath, feeling renewed and hopeful for the first time since the tragedy that had rocked his family. On the way back home, he passed the park where he used to take Sophia to play. The memory of his daughter's infectious laugh echoed in his mind, bringing him a nostalgic smile. "I'm doing the right thing," he muttered to himself, feeling a new sense of purpose surge within him. "I will find you, no matter how long it takes." Sophia. He knew there was still a long way to go in his journey of healing and rediscovery, but now he was ready to face each step with courage and determination. The sale of the company was not the end, but rather a new beginning, an opportunity to rebuild his life on his own terms, while keeping the memory of his loved ones alive at the core of his being. And not only of the company, he fell apart when Roberto observed the last furniture being removed from the mansion that was once his home. The feeling of emptiness within those walls now reflected the emptiness he had carried in his heart since Sophia had disappeared. Selling the house was a difficult but necessary decision. He could no longer stand the quiet echoes of children's laughter that once filled the halls. As he closed the door for the last time, Roberto took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. He knew what he needed to do. There was no more room for the comfortable and safe life he once knew. His journey now was a tireless search for Sophia wherever it led him. He left without a definite plan, but with an unshakable promise in his heart to find his lost daughter. Roberto traveled all over Ohio, guided by his private detective, following fragile clues and talking to people who might have seen something that could help him. Each new piece of information lit a spark of hope within him, even if it often turned out to be just an illusion. The months passed without respite, and Sophia had already disappeared for more than a year. Because of this, he caught himself thinking about how she would be, what her voice and face would be like. Roberto faced adversity and moments of despair, but his determination did not waver. He met parents who had lost their children, sharing stories of pain and hope with people who understood their desperate search. During a lonely night in a distant city, Roberto found himself gazing up at the starry sky, reflecting on all he had left behind. He thought about Martha and how she always supported him even in the darkest moments. He thought about Sophia, wondering how she would be now, would remember him, if he would still be recognizable after so many years of tireless search. "I will find you, Sophia," he murmured to the night sky, his words getting lost in the silence of the night. "No matter how long it takes, I will find you." Every road traveled, every city visited, was a small, renewed hope, a relentless search for a reunion that he knew would change his life forever. 2 years had passed since the fateful afternoon when Sophia disappeared. The pain of loss was still as fresh as if it were yesterday. Every memory of her was like a sharp knife driven into his heart. Roberto now wandered the streets of the city, lit by Christmas lights, where each festive glow only highlighted his own inner darkness. The cold wind cut through his skin as he walked aimlessly, looking up for some divine sign, some answer that might calm the storm within him. "Where are you, my daughter?" murmured Roberto to the night sky, his voice choked by the weight of 2 years of tireless search and dwindling hope. Sitting on a lonely bench by the curb, he closed his eyes and allowed the tears to roll freely, as if they were the only tangible connection to the pain and longing that consumed him. The emptiness around him echoed with the cruelty of silence, but also with the promise of a new beginning if only he could find a way. It was then that he noticed a group of street children not far away. They were small human beings facing a harsh reality, but their laughter and simple banter defied adversity as a reminder of an innocence lost to Roberto. Curious and touched by the scene, Roberto approached the children with hesitant steps and watched them play among themselves, until, taken by an impulse that even he did not recognize, he said, "Hey, would you guys like a snack?" he asked, trying not to let out the emotion in his voice. The children, initially suspicious, were soon filled with enthusiasm at the unexpected offer. "Really?" one of them asked, her eyes wide with surprise and hope. Roberto nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Yes, come on. I'll pay for all of us." He took them to a diner across the street where he ordered burgers and fries for each of the children. As they sat down and began to eat, the lively conversation and sincere gratitude of the children filled the air around them, bringing a lightness that Roberto had not felt for some time. As he listened to the children's stories about their lives on the streets, their simple dreams, and their hopes for a better future, Roberto felt something move inside him. It was as if a thread of hope, once so fragile and hidden under layers of pain, began to unwind. That night, when Roberto finally returned to the hotel where he was staying, he lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling. Thoughts roiled his weary mind, but between them there was a growing clarity. He realized that Sofia was not only lost to him, but also to a world that was often cruel to the disadvantaged. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something for the future of the children he met. A flame of purpose began to burn within him, a renewed determination to not only look for Sofia, but also to make a difference in the lives of those in need. The next morning, Robert woke up with a firm resolution. He began to devise a plan to bring joy to some children. Every step he planned was a silent tribute to Sofia, a promise that he would not give up on her, but also that he would not waste his own life in despair. Thus, Roberto began a double journey: to continue his tireless search for Sofia while dedicating himself to doing good for other children who needed hope and care. Taking advantage of the Christmas season, he began to visit orphanages and bring toys and food to the children, so he went on a walk all over the United States. In every childish smile and every small gesture of gratitude, he found a little peace and a renewed purpose, guided by the belief that perhaps in the act of helping others he could find his way back to his own lost soul. 4 years had passed since Sofia disappeared. During this time, since the already distant night of Christmas Eve in a city in the United States that found street children playing, Roberto has traveled all over Latin America, visiting orphanages and bringing them joy, talking to local authorities, and spreading the word about his desperate search for his daughter. Every child's face he encountered, every difficult life story he heard, only intensified his determination to find Sofia. Now at Sao Paulo Airport, Roberto was waiting for his flight to South Africa. It was a journey he had planned meticulously, relying on contacts and promises of help he had made over the years. As he watched the hurrying people pass him, he muttered to himself, as if reaffirming his silent commitment to Sofia and his purpose. "I haven't forgotten you, Sofia," he said in a whisper, his words lost in the cacophony of the airport. "I will find you no matter where you are." He found himself a quiet corner near a window, allowing tiredness and sadness to show in his expression. Closing his eyes for a moment, he gave himself up to silent prayer, seeking strength and guidance amid the uncertainty surrounding his mission. "Guide me, please," he murmured, his voice charged with restrained emotion. "Show me the way to Sofia." The boarding announcement brought him back to reality. With a deep sigh, Roberto grabbed his hand luggage and headed to the boarding gate with a mix of expectation and apprehension. He settled into his seat on the plane, looking out the window as the city of Sao Paulo disappeared below him. During the hours of flight, Roberto revised his plans meticulously. He had contacts in South Africa, people who promised to help him in his search. The country was vast and unknown to him, but each new border crossed was a step towards Sofia. Upon arriving in Johannesburg, Roberto felt the warmth of the African land envelop him. It was a place of contrasts where natural beauty mixed with the harsh reality of many lives. He found himself in new territory, a land of unknown possibilities and challenges. In the days that followed, Roberto visited orphanages, spoke to local authorities, and distributed leaflets with Sofia's photo. Each contact, each conversation was a small, renewed hope amid the vastness of the search. He shared stories of desperate parents searching for their lost children, finding solidarity and understanding in people whose lives shared a common thread of loss and hope. On a hot, starry night, Roberto was sitting outside his small hotel in Johannesburg. He looked at the distant horizon, thinking about everything he had faced and everything that was yet to come. He took a worn photograph of Sofia, which he had carried with him for so many years, and held it close to his heart. "I will find you, my dear," he murmured to the night sky. "No matter where you are, I won't give up." Roberto landed in a small town in the South African countryside where the scorching sun contrasted with the serene beauty of the African landscape. He had come with a clear purpose: to visit a local orphanage. As he approached the orphanage, Roberto carried a mixture of emotions. Africa was an unfamiliar place for him, but he was determined to help and find a connection that would lead him to his missing daughter. He carried a huge bag filled with assorted toys. Upon entering the orphanage, he was greeted with shouts of joy by an excited group of children. They ran around him, curious to see what he had brought. Roberto smiled, feeling a comforting warmth in his heart as he saw the beaming faces and heard the innocent laughter fill the simple surroundings. He was grateful to have the opportunity to bring a little joy to those children, but his sadness at Sophia's absence still accompanied him at every step. The children ran and played with him, and Roberto played with them. However, a small girl with dark hair and deep-set eyes remained away from the group. She looked older than her years, carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. His gaze was distant, as if in another completely different place. "Who is she?" Roberto asked one of the nurses. "She's only been here a short time. She's feeling lonely. We still can't make her smile." Roberto approached her carefully, noticing her silent sadness. He knelt beside her, offering her one of the toys he had brought. "Hello, my name is Roberto," he said softly, trying to gain her trust. "I brought these toys for you. What's her name?" The girl looked at him for a moment, assessing him cautiously before muttering, "I am Naledi."
Roberto smiled gently.
"Naledi, it's a pleasure to meet you." He held out the toy to her. "I hope you like it." Naledi picked up the toy hesitantly, her eyes lighting up slightly with curiosity. She began to examine him without saying a word, but Roberto could feel an invisible barrier between them. While the other children played around, Roberto decided to sit next to Naledi. "How are you feeling today?" he asked softly, trying to start a conversation. Naledi did not immediately respond. She continued to fiddle with the toy, looking lost in her own thoughts. After a moment, she looked at Roberto with a sad expression. "I miss my mother," she said quietly, as if sharing a painful secret. Robert's heart sank. He knew all about loss and longing. "I understand," he answered truthfully. "Sometimes things can be difficult, can't they?" Naledi nodded slowly, looking down. She said no more, but Robert felt that his words had touched a deep place within her. As time went on, Roberto spent more time with the children, distributing the toys and sharing stories. He couldn't help but notice that Naledi remained reserved, watching him from afar. However, he did not give up trying to cheer her up, knowing that confidence and comfort could come with time. As the sun began to set and night came on, Roberto noticed something that made his heart race. When Naledi lifted her blouse sleeve to grab a toy, he noticed a birthmark on her arm. It was exactly the same brand as Sophia and that he had. Roberto shuddered involuntarily, his heart pounding. He felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: shock, hope, and a deep fear. He blinked quickly, trying to hold back the tears that were beginning to blur his vision. The directors of the orphanage noticed the change in Roberto and approached worried. "Mr. Robert, what happened?" one of them asked in a soft, worried voice. Robert tried to speak, but his voice failed. He took a deep breath and finally managed to say, "That mark, it's identical, my daughter's." His voice broke at the end of the sentence, and he held Naledi's arm carefully, not believing what he was seeing. Her eyes shed tears copiously, and Roberto fell to his knees on the floor. The directors of the orphanage exchanged puzzled looks. They had never noticed the birthmark on Naledi before. One of them knelt beside Robert, holding his hand compassionately. "That is amazing," she murmured, not knowing what to say in the face of the revelation. Roberto looked at Naledi, whose eyes were now filled with curiosity and a faint hope. He wiped a lonely tear that ran down her cheek and smiled gently at her. "You are a very special girl, Naledi," he said in an emotional voice. "Very special indeed." Naledi looked at him, not fully understanding the magnitude of what had just happened, but feeling an inexplicable connection with that stranger who seemed to share his pain and his story. It had been more than 5 years since the fateful day, and Sophia was now 6 years old. It was her, it could only be her. Robert was trembling, unable to express what was going on in his mind. Roberto hugged Naledi, tightly, crying over the girl. "Sophia, are you yourself?" he asked, without getting any answers from the girl, who kept staring at him. That night he did not want to leave the orphanage, insisted that he could sleep on the floor, but he would not leave there. But there was no way to prove at that moment that it was really Sophia. Apart from the birthmark, he had nothing else, but he felt it. He knew that it was his daughter, and he was ecstatic with everything. He did not stop crying in disbelief. The next day, Robert had barely slept. His mind was filled with an overwhelming mixture of hope and anxiety, and soon he was able to schedule the DNA test. He spent the entire morning inside the orphanage without taking his eyes off Naledi, as he waited for the DNA test that could finally confirm if Naledi was his daughter Sophia. He remained in the orphanage, determined to solve everything as soon as possible. Every second felt like an eternity as I waited in the waiting room, my mind spinning with possibilities and fears. When the result was finally ready, Roberto took the envelope with trembling hands. He sat alone in a small room of the orphanage, his breath caught as he carefully opened the envelope. His eyes fixed on the words printed on the paper, and a mixture of relief, joy, and pain came over him. There it was. The DNA test confirmed what he longed for. Naledi was Sophia. The daughter he had lost so many years ago was there, alive and real before his eyes. Robert could not contain the tears that welled up in his eyes, hot and salty, like a mixture of years of pain and a new reborn hope. He knelt on the cold floor of the room, hugging the envelope to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The words of gratitude echoed softly on his lips as he murmured a thank you to the heavens, Martha, and all the angels who had guided him up to that moment. "You're here, Sophia," he whispered through tears, his eyes lost in a mix of indescribable emotions. "Dad is here. I'll never lose sight of you again." The pain of loss which had haunted him for so long slowly began to fade before the certainty that he had finally found his daughter. It was as if a colossal weight had been removed from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of renewed peace and purpose. As he left the room, Roberto was greeted by the directors of the orphanage, who shared his joy and relief. They hugged him warmly, aware of the emotional journey he had faced to get there. Together, they walked back to the courtyard of the orphanage where Naledi was nonchalantly playing with other children. Roberto looked at her with a love that overflowed from every fiber of his being, knowing that life had given them a second chance to be together again, and he would no longer fail. As the sun began to set on the African horizon, Roberto held the hand of Naledi, now recognized as Sophia, with a soft and comforting grip. Together, they watched the sky dye with warm, vibrant colors symbolic of the new hope that sprouted in their united hearts. He would have to win back his own daughter and make her know him, but it didn't matter. She was there, and they could be together for eternity. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.